Most people today think of African hairstyles as fashion or personal style choices. But here's the thing. For thousands of years, hair across the African continent was not just style. It was identity, communication, politics, spirituality, and survival. And in some cases, hairstyles carried maps, messages, and escape routes braided into the scalp. Cornrows once contained escape routes, literally maps braided into hair. Today, we're going to uncover the history and meaning behind African hairstyles, from braids that mapped escape paths, to spiritual codes, to cultural identities that survived centuries of disruption. Hair as identity. Across many African societies, hair functioned as a form of identification. Not abstractly, but literally. Hairstyles told you important things like what family someone came from, whether they were married, whether they were in mourning, whether they were royalty, whether they had reached adulthood, whether they belonged to a particular ethnic group. Among the Himba people of Namibia, young girls wear two forward-pointing braids called ozendato, but after puberty, girls shift to long, ochre-coated braids symbolizing womanhood. Among the Yoruba of Nigeria, hairstyles could indicate royal status or membership in specific guilds. Certain patterns were reserved for the palace. Among the Wolof in Senegal, elaborate braided crowns communicated lineage and social position. Hair wasn't random. People could literally read your hair the same way we read ID cards today. In Africa, hair once worked like an ID card. Braids as messaging systems. Now let's get into the part that surprises a lot of people. Braids weren't just social markers. They were also messaging systems. One of the most famous oral accounts comes from Afro-Colombian communities, especially around the Palenque region, where descendants of escaped Africans preserve memories of braiding escape routes into cornrows. They braided pathways, meeting points, warnings, escape instructions into people's hair. In some cases, cornrow rows represented rivers and roads, while raised braided bumps represented mountains or safe houses. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, but the cultural memory remains strong across Afro-descendant communities. One style was even called departs, meaning to depart. It symbolized flight, escape, and movement. This turns braiding into an act of resistance, not just beauty. Think about it. Hair grows out of your head. It can't be confiscated. It can't be searched. And most importantly, it doesn't look suspicious. Hair as spiritual territory. Hair also held deep spiritual meaning. In many African traditions, hair was considered the highest point of the body, closest to the heavens, and therefore closest to the divine. Among the Yoruba, hair is connected to Ori, the inner head or soul, which represents destiny. Touching someone's hair without permission wasn't just rude. It was a spiritual violation. Among the Dinka in South Sudan, young men coated their hair with ash to connect with ancestors and to signal maturity. Among the Zulu, hair signaled marital status. Married men tied their hair into top knots, symbolizing a bond between themselves, their family, and their ancestors. Hair wasn't just style. It was spiritual territory. Hairstyles as social codes. In many communities, hair carried social instructions. For example, new mothers wore specific hairstyles indicating postpartum status. Young men undergoing initiation wore distinct hair patterns. Warriors wore hairstyles meant to intimidate or distinguish them on the battlefield. Brides wore ceremonial hair during weddings that could take days to prepare. Among the Mangbeta people of Congo, elongated hairstyles and head binding created extended skull shapes associated with beauty and nobility. Among the Hamar people of Ethiopia, clay-coated hairstyles worn by men indicated warrior status. Among the Samburu in Kenya, warriors keep long, ochre-covered braids until they transition to elderhood. So again, hair communicated role, status, age, responsibility, community. You didn't need to ask someone who they were. You saw it. Colonial disruption. This cultural language didn't disappear naturally. It was suppressed. During the colonial era, European administrators, schools, and churches imposed grooming standards designed to erase African identity. Traditional hairstyles were labeled primitive, uncivilized, tribal, pagan. Students were punished for wearing traditional hair. Workers were denied employment for wearing braids. Churchgoers were forced to cut their hair or cover it. This wasn't just about hair. It was about cultural control. Hair in the diaspora. Even after displacement, African hairstyles survived across the Atlantic. Cornrows, box braids, bantu knots, and locks stayed alive in Brazil, the Caribbean, Colombia, the United States, the Dominican Republic. Enslaved Africans kept braiding to remember home, to maintain identity, to resist assimilation. During the Black Power movement of the 1960s and 70s, afros and locks became political again. They said, "I'm not hiding my roots. I'm not conforming to someone else's standard." Braids are not trends. They are survivors. The global return. Today, we're living through a return. From Lagos to London, Johannesburg to Atlanta, Kingston to Paris, people of African descent are reclaiming braided hairstyles not just as fashion, but as heritage. Yet, most people still have no idea what these hairstyles once meant. They don't know that braids carried escape routes, spiritual significance, family lineage, social status, tribal identity. Hair in Africa has always been language. We just forgot how to read it. If this opened your eyes, there's another part of African history that rarely gets mentioned. The story of a medieval African city built around books, scholars, and knowledge. I'm talking about Timbuktu, home to thousands of manuscripts and one of the world's oldest universities. It shows that communication, learning, and identity have always been part of Africa's story, long before colonial narratives tried to rewrite it. If you enjoy learning African history this way, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. That helps this channel reach more people who were never taught this in school. So if you want to continue learning, tap the video on your screen and discover the real history of Timbuktu. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of Africa's story. Thanks for watching.